The first skill in P9 is to be able to write answers in interval notation. In P7, we were able to solve equations and we determined a solution set. Well, that means that the variable was able to take on one specific value. Now in P9, we're actually saying that a variable could take on many more values, and in fact, infinitely many, anything that is between any two numbers. So just some examples that you will see in this section could be intervals like 1 to 2, and so there's different variations here. We'll talk about what the different end marks mean, so a parentheses versus a bracket. And you may see two intervals with a U in the middle. We'll talk about that. The empty set, technically the empty set is a set, but you can also use it in terms of an interval. And we can see intervals might involve infinity, positive infinity, or negative infinity. Okay, non-examples are something where you have curly braces involved, or even if you have just a single number in there or not in there. If you have a single number, it's best to use set notation. Okay, first let's talk about closing marks. So closing marks, if you see closing marks that are parentheses, that means that the end value is not included in the interval. So for example, the interval, or this interval 1 to 2, this means all the numbers in between 1 and 2, excluding 1 and 2 themselves. So this is like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, all the way up to 1.9, say. But then again, you have all the decimals in between there, so you have 1.01. So there's a lot of numbers in between there that we can't even count. That's why we use interval notation. Now, if you have brackets, that means that the end value is included in the interval. So, for example, in this one, it's very similar to this one that we just talked about, but in this case, both 1 and 2 are in the interval. Okay, so bracket versus parentheses. Now, we can also represent these graphically. So, if we see brackets, that's when we have a closed dot. And if we have parentheses, that's when we have an open dot. So I'm going to put these values on my number line, the end values on my number line. So here's -2, and here's 3. And I look at the end marks. So I have a bracket at 2. Okay, so I have a closed dot here. So I have a closed dot here. And then at 3, I have a parentheses, so that's going to be an open dot. And then graphically, to indicate that I have an interval, I have to take the line between the 2 points. Oh, and I did that incorrectly. Let's erase a little bit here. Okay, so you just join the two lines. Alright, and then if we have intervals involving infinity, that just means that we have to extend forever in one direction. So for this first interval, from -2 to infinity, I'm going to put -2 on my number line, but infinity is just a concept, okay? So you can't actually put a number on here, but all you have to do with your number line is, okay, we have a closed dot here, and then extend forever to the right. Similarly with this other one, if you start at -1, oh, wrong thing. Let's see, -1. We have a parentheses, so that means we have an open dot, and then you extend forever to the left because you go off to negative infinity, which means that values get larger and larger and larger negatively. So you have to extend to the left. Okay, so far we've talked about drawing intervals, we've talked about what the closing marks mean, and now we saw that U before, and that is when we use, or when we have the union of two intervals. And a union just means that you take all the members from either interval and join them together. Okay, and so it's for U, I remember union, you use a U. That's what just helps me. So if we need to draw this out, I start out by putting all my numbers on my number line. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I would fill in everything. So I have open circles, draw a line between them, open circles, and draw the line between them. And this one, typically when we see these, we want to try and simplify the interval, but this one you can't write in any simpler way. So we would say that this would be the graphical representation of this interval. Okay. When you see, I forgot to mention, when you see English statements that involve the word or, that's when you typically use a union. Okay, let's look at another example here. So the interval from 1 to or 0 to 3, 0 exclusive, 3 inclusive, union -4 exclusive to 1 inclusive. Okay, I need to put all this on my number line. So here's 0, and let's see what are the other numbers. 1 and 3, and I have a -4. Okay, so let's do this one in blue. So 0 exclusive to 3 inclusive, and I draw a line. Okay, and 4 exclusive to 1 inclusive, and I went a little past. That's okay, I'll erase it. Okay, and now I see that these intervals actually do overlap. Okay, so I can simplify this a little bit. And so when I do the union, that would just be everything that is in either one. So if they overlap, I can just kind of smush them together and then make one interval. So my combined interval, my interval that would be my union, I'd go from the farthest left point at -4, and 3 would be my farthest right point, and I would join them. So, but the question is, I have an open circle here. That means that value is not present on this blue interval. Well, that's actually okay, because if I go directly up to the other interval, if I go directly up to this interval, there's a line there, and when you do a line, that means that the value is included. So it's actually okay to, if there's a open circle but a solid line in between, that means that that value is still included. So the union, I could actually simplify this to -4 to 1 inclusive, and you always want to try to simplify it if you can. Okay, so that's a union. The other symbol that you might see in in interval notation is an intersection. And an intersection, the idea is that you're looking for, so you have two intervals and you're finding the common elements. And let me point that out. Common to both. Okay, so what is in common between the two intervals? That's your job to find out. Okay, so let's start by putting these intervals on a number line. 3, and there's going to be a closed dot, and that extends forever to the left. And then the other one is going to be 1, and we have an open circle there, and we extend forever to the right. Now I need to ask myself, okay, so I have these two intervals. What is common between both? And when I look, I see that this blue area is common to both. So my answer here is going to be 1 exclusive, because technically I can look at 1, and 1 is on both of them, but in the red one it is not included versus the green one it is included. So I want to make sure I exclude it just so that I know that it is common. And then 3, there's a closed dot here, and then since we have a line, remember that's the same as a closed dot. So this would be the final answer. Would be this intersection would simplify to the interval from 1 exclusive to 3 inclusive. Let's try one more. Okay, so we have the interval -4 to 0, -4 to 0, and it's exclusive on both. So there's my interval. And then I have 2 to 3, exclusive on 2, inclusive on 3, and I connect. And my drawings aren't quite so great. Hopefully yours are better. So now I need to ask myself what numbers or what values are common to both. So I'm looking for some overlap. I don't see any overlap. So actually this one, I would say the empty set, because they don't share any common elements. Okay. The last thing that I'll mention about intersection is, remember that for unions we looked for or, the word or. In intersections you look for the word and. Okay, and so this is a basic overview of interval notation, which is one of the 3 skills in P9.